podcast, Sophie Wade talks about embracing progress and the next steps for the future of work. So stay tuned. So welcome everyone to Jobs of Future podcast. Today we have with us Sophie Wade and a brief bio. So Sophie Wade is an author of Embracing Progress, Next Steps for the Future of Work, which is an Executive MBA Program textbook. She has held senior management, strategy, financial roles around the world, working in media, technology, venture capital for companies such as IMG and Yahoo. Sophie has a BA from Oxford University and an MBA from top-tiered INSEAD. Sophie is a prominent speaker, writer on future of work topics. She is also founder and workforce innovation specialist at Flixel network, a future of work focused consultancy through intelligence briefing, transformative workshop. Sophie helps companies to future-proof their work environment and create compelling, competitive, and digitally integrated workplace to attract, engage, and retain their multi-generational distributed talent. Wow, that's a mouthful. So, thank you so much, Sophie, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Interesting. I think what I found really fascinating about your profile and your background is your grasp on this word, what we hear a lot about, called future of work. And I think that's pretty much where even we based our conversation, our podcast around. And when we saw that you have a book about embracing progress, and it's a very forward-looking book, I said we want to have you on the podcast. And thank you so much for picking that request. So now, why don't you walk us through what brought you here? Like, what's your background and what brought you to this world of future of work?
It's sort of an interesting journey. My background is all sort of strategy and finance and strategic development, working sometimes for startups, sometimes for large corporations, but always sort of building new ventures within an organization or for a startup. But it wasn't until I guess 2010 when my daughter was 3 and my son was 10, and she first had a voice and was sort of saying, Mommy, can't you get a half job or something? And so she was looking for me to have some more flexibility because she didn't see me that much. And so that was when I first started really being interested in workplace flexibility and having different ways of working. And I did a lot of research about it, and I thought it was just a women's issue. And then the more research I did, I was like, no, we all need to have more flexibility, and there's all kinds of historical reasons, but we've been working very much like machines for a long time, and now technology is bringing us very, very different ways of being able to work, and therefore there could easily be different ways of working that can suit us all each better. So it was really driven by sort of seeing what's been going on in society and what the technology is allowing us to do differently. So that was my journey, and then as from workplace flexibility, it sort of expanded out when I saw this umbrella term called the future of work, which encompasses many things. And I realized how much was changing in so many areas, and therefore how challenging that is for organizations to really try and adapt for their employees and for their own businesses. Technology is changing things in such dramatic ways, and therefore there are a lot of different things that we need to adapt in order to be able to sort of optimize for the technology and for ourselves as well.
Interesting, fascinating. And what is Flixel network? Like what's that? If you can walk us through.
Flixel is a consultancy, so I do a lot of speaking about the future of work and sort of helping people understand some of what I have learned over these last 7 years about what's going on, and just sort of sharing information, which is why I tried to put it down in a book and sort of explain, like, this is what's going on, and sort of why we're here, and where I think that it's going to be going based on a lot of research that I found. And Flixel is really helping companies try and make that transition. So we do workshops, we do sort of consulting and helping companies make the transition to different ways of working, which can be based on culture. It can be helping people work, helping a multi-generational workforce work more cohesively and collaborate more easily. And there's a lot of challenges with the distributed, the decentralized workforce. And so helping people sort of manage slightly differently, and helping also workers understand how they work so that they can perform better in a very different workplace or work scenarios.
Interesting. And now let's talk about the book, Embracing Progress: Next Steps for the Future of Work. And full disclosure, I ordered your book, didn't get a chance to read it. So, but definitely I will get to it eventually. Why write this book? Like, what's the motivation behind this book?
This is hard. I mean, the amount of change that's going on right now is not easy to deal with. When I'm speaking, and I use it in the book as well, I use the technical term messy. It is going to be messy for a good 10 years for everybody. I mean, the sort of the comforting thing really is it's messy for all of us, because we're all dealing with these changes, no matter what industry we're in, no matter what generation we're from. There is so much change going on at the same time that we're all trying to work out how we fit, how to work well together, how to deal with the increased, the sort of accelerated pace of business, and the feedback loops, and the information, the transparency, and the data. It's sort of endless. So the reason was to sort of say, okay, here's a whole bunch of information so you can understand it better, because I think having more comfort about where you are comes first of all from having more of an understanding of the situation that we're all in, and then sort of trying to give some guidelines or suggestions as to how that you might approach it, that people can sort of look at where they are, and what I talk about in the book is trying to sort of take a step back and saying, look, it's going to be very different because so much is changing. So sort of step back for a second and have a think about how your business might best work. And technology is dramatically changing some businesses and industries. For example, accounting. It's wiping out some of the worst, most boring automated jobs at the bottom. But that then changes how the funnel of training people up, because if you don't have the bottom rung, like how are you bringing people into the organization to train them up and get to the next levels? Also, a lot of accounting firms in the US are finding it very difficult to find the younger hires, because a lot of them don't want to go into jobs that they think are going to be automated away. So just trying to have an understanding of how this might impact your industry, what to do about it, how to think about it, and sort of how to navigate the world that we're in right now, and sort of where I believe, for a lot of reasonably supported reasons, where I think it's going to go, and sort of just a guide, giving some tools and tips to how to think about it.
Interesting. And I think awesome. And one thing that we are seeing nowadays, Sophie, is that we are seeing a lot of decentralization happening in the workforce. What's your take? Like, what's happening, and what to expect from it? Like, what? Yeah, if you can shed your 2 cents on that.
Sure. Well, I think decentralized workforce is going to be the norm for all companies. To whatever degree. I think that decentralized workforce is also going to be blended, or a composite workforce, whatever term you want to do, which means a higher percentage of freelancers and independent contractors, as well as employees. So that brings not only sort of location, but a different employee relationships, work relationships with workers, and how they are sort of integrated into the mix. And what that means, it means for managers, it means that what I've seen is that a lot of management, when you're all in the same office, is kind of done sort of haphazardly because you happen to all be there. And you're like, John, did you get that done? And what about you, Mary? And stuff like that. But if you sort of intuitively know those two people work differently, and you sort of adjust for it, but you don't necessarily recognize it explicitly. When John and Mary might be working in very different places, and they have different personalities, and one likes to work late at night, and one needs a lot more support, not because she or he is not an effective worker, but just they're people who might need, don't really deal as well with such isolation. They really want some sort of to be closer to the team and more camaraderie or more support, checking in on milestones, things like that. So those differences for a manager become, managers I see need to be much more proactive and much more aware of how each individual worker works and help them understand it too. So the manager becomes much more of a coach now, and trying to so they understand much more about how they can make each person be more productive and more effective. And from the worker's point of view, again, it's them also being more self-aware about how I work best, and am I good at working sort of in isolation, whether it's from home or from a third place, and how much support do I need, and how much, and then the tools that I might need to use. There are all kinds of different software and applications that can help, project management tools that can help me be more effective. But I can be most effective if I have an understanding, much more of an understanding of how I work. So, and then adjust for that. So there are a lot of changes like that in terms of really having much clearer understanding of how you're working together in teams. And then culture, when you have a decentralized workforce, becomes that much more important, because if you and I are part of the same team, but we're working thousands of miles apart, what's going to connect us is a sort of common feeling of cultural values for our organization. And that will make me feel that I kind of know you better than, if I've never met you or just seen you over, over video chat, because we have those common values, and that's going to ground us and connect us. So being able to communicate values, to have strong corporate values that people connect with, and that's part of why they come to a particular organization. So it changes a lot about the environment and how people are working and how they get supported. And technically, of course, they need to be supported well.
We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast. Interesting. And then when I think about, say, the word progress and the word embracing in the construct of future of work, I see organizations swallowing this idea of, hey, something is changing and how should I change? And I see as a professional, hey, how should I change interacting with this progress? What would progress means to me when in this paradigm of change, and the leadership. So what is embracing progress for an organization? Like, what's your 2 cents on, if I'm an organization, what is embracing progress to me or for me?
So I chose the word progress because I think more than anything, we're going change. Human beings don't typically really embrace change. It's uncomfortable. We like habits, we like routines. That makes us feel safe. Progress is one of the words that has there's a destination. It's not a specific set destination, but it feels good and it feels positive, and you feel like you're sort of moving onwards and upwards, which is sort of one of my phrases. And you can sort of forget about some of the scary bits on the sides as you're going there, as kind of like, I'm not quite sure how it's going to happen, but that's where I'm going. And that is part of sort of evolution, and that we are all instinctively drawn to try and do things that are going to make our lives and our work lives too better. So that's kind of one of the ideas about why progress, and that I do fundamentally believe that so much of what we're talking about is better ways of working. I mean, we have not in the past cared very much at all about people being happy or enjoying what they're doing. I mean, the work was kind of connect with suffering and being compensated. I mean, compensation means you're sort of being, it's an exchange for something that isn't necessarily that great. So changing to work to be something that we can enjoy, that we are working smarter, not harder. We can work, a reasonable number of hours and be focused on results. And if I can really get my results, if I can get my work done, that my boss, may not care how I get it done, as long as I'm focused on results in that way. So how for corporations, I think it's really a question of particularly looking, and I see that as a balance between talent and technology. So what technology tools are there? Tools not driven by technology, but seeing that there are amazing ways, new ways of working based on technology that allow us to work in different ways and smarter. We have these amazingly powerful phones in our hands. And with talent, how can we use that technology and those tools to support talent and get the most out of every single one? Productivity has been low and engagement has been very low for years, because we haven't tried to individually understand each person and say, okay, Sophie, how do you work best? What is it what are your strengths? Let's focus on your strengths and see how we can make you the best worker possible. Working on that. So I think when corporations can look and leaders can really try and empower their employees, also because things are happening so much faster, so they need to sort of empower people down and out through organizations, they then become and take on board this technology and take on board the fact that their talent are the most valuable assets in their organization. And then the more that they can sort of identify how and where and when each individual works best, they will get the most out of, the business results will show for themselves.
Interesting. And I think when we interact with HR, and I think one thing that we observe, and we were told by a bunch of HR leaders when it comes to progress or embracing progress. So I think one guy put it best. He said, "Vishal, I'm in HR. My job is to preserve and protect the culture and hopefully recruit technology for the future," right? I said, typically my allegiance is more towards preserve and protect the culture, right? So that means by definition and by the core sort of fundamentals, it's very hard for HR to move or to change, right? And that's, so what's your take on for HR executives who are in this sort of confusion of, hey, if I change too fast, I may lose out on the culture of the company and I may lose out on this edge that has brought us to this point of success so far?
I totally agree. It is a conundrum, and it is not easy. It really is for anybody. This is really not easy. It's very doable, and I think culture is so critical because it, as I said, it grounds people. It helps, and choosing some timeless values like integrity and family can really, because they don't change over time, when everything else is changing around, these can be sort of grounding elements. And I think a company may have a strong culture, but they might need to sort of use a few more elements that might help them more in this type of environment. So not that they didn't have a culture, but they may want to sort of shift the weighting to include particularly mindsets that are open-minded and inclusive. And open-mindedness, I find, is absolutely critical in order to be able to deal with the pace of change that we're looking at. Because if you're stuck with an old mindset that was kind of like, we did this for, one of the reasons I left England was because it was so much like, we've been doing it like this for 500 years. And, I was like, your point is what? That why is that a reason to keep doing it like that? So thinking about the culture and the elements of the culture that are really going to help that company succeed in the future. So yes, definitely being very true to nurturing that cultural core, but it might need a bit of reweighting to help that culture be a truly sustainable culture that can drive then everything else radiate from there in this new environment.
Interesting. And a segue on that. So if we look say embracing progress from a vantage point of a leader, I think I remember one of the conversation I had with one of the chief innovation officer for a very large financial services firm, and I was talking to him, hey, how do you promote innovation? And he jokingly said, but he did say that. He said that, Vishal, I want my people to innovate as long as they don't take too big risks. So now innovation and risk, right? So it again sort of boiled down to the element of fear of change, or fear of change beyond sort of something we can grasp on, and sort of I stuck in this idea of, hey, what will happen if market changes rapidly for you? How would you transform yourself quickly if you don't get your people to be attuned to this new way?
Right.
From your vantage point, what is embracing progress for a leader who wants to ensure that they will exist in this rapidly transformational world? We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
The way you put that is exactly right, because myself and other people who in my position believe that if you don't evolve, if your company doesn't evolve, you will die. Your company will die. You won't be able to hire people. You won't be able to be continue to be competitive. I mean, this is the moment to start to really, transform if your company isn't in the wave of that. So it was a very interesting point you meant in terms of innovation and risk. So I have seen very much over the last 5 years, I guess, 3 to 5 years, a different evaluation of risk. And, there's the lean startup model, but also just looking at risk in terms of understanding failure and how much you can learn from failure. And so having an understanding of what reasonable risk is, and being very clear to people in a team or a department or division as to what risk they can and are permitted to take. And then make sure that they're learning from that. And then, because when we're moving so fast, when we're getting, very quick feedback loops from customers, we need, there needs to be a constant sort of cycle of innovation. It's not like Microsoft puts out a product, every 3 years anymore. A lot of software is being updated, even weekly or at least monthly in many organizations. So having a different way of evaluating how to look at receiving inputs, taking a sort of reasonable estimation of what that could mean, how we could change the product, testing it, and then rolling it out. So it's a very different type of innovation cycle that we're seeing. And also within organizations, how can we work effectively as a team? Let's continue to iterate. So it's not, we have this meeting, we make a decision, we do that, and move on. It is continually going back and seeing, is this right now? And KPIs that, used to be set year long are now, could be irrelevant in 3 months. So performance reviews are changing dramatically. And Deloitte was the leader, as I'm sure you know, in terms of changing performance reviews, which used to be annual, and now they're doing weekly check-in. And, those become sort of coaching sessions really between a supervisor and their employee. And those are sort of helpful in terms of a rapidly evolving environment that more information can be shared as a project evolves to make sure that everybody's online, and if the KPIs might need to be changed.
Interesting. And what's the resolve for a professional? I think we hear a lot about professionals worrying about, hey, my boss doesn't like surprises, right? So he he want me, like he doesn't appreciate me thinking out loud, or what is the resolve for that guy? Like how would that guy or gal embrace progress?
Um, the I certainly believe that open-mindedness and transparency, which go hand in hand, are extremely important in order to be successful as we move forward. Because things are changing so fast, because ideas need to be disseminated through all the organization, be able to be tested and brainstormed effectively. And there will be supervisors, there will be people in your team or above or below you who don't embrace the new ways of working in the same way. And that is challenging. We have been deliberately schooled to think in very linear, static ways. That was how we were schooled to deal with working in factories. And so the education system, there's a lot that needs to change in the education system to not be training for specific professions. So that is a whole nother area of challenge. But it means that I think if you do have somebody who you're working with who is very sort of set in their ways, there are ways to work with them. I think they will find that it's it becomes more challenging to include them in the same way. Things are moving so fast. But these are critical times to be understanding that we're in a very different place and we're working in very different ways than we were.
Interesting. And I think one thing that we used to see when we were centralized, there's one office we all go to, we got to see and experience and feel the culture of the company, bring a dog to a work day or whatever you call it, right? So there were some clear signs of what this company represents and stand behind. But now the world is getting a lot more distributed, as you rightly said. And
right.
the belief system or the culture that used to attract great talent and at least like-minded talent to an organization, it get all the more murkier. Like, hey, maybe I'm a remote office guy going once or maybe never to a company and still serving. How is culture changing? How is culture taking this embracing progress shift? Like, what's your take on that?
I personally, I think that that so many organizations haven't necessarily had a strong culture, or they may have had a sort of plaque on the wall, but it wasn't really lived. It wasn't lived and breathed and made a core part of the daily workplace. And constantly an example set by the executives and the CEO and making sure that it was also lived by all the employees. I don't think that was very common. And that is what I think is needed now, particularly, as you're saying, with a distributed workforce, when people may be very remote. And it struck me at how effective it can be when it's done right. A woman I know, her company was just bought by a company that's based in Omaha. And I guess about a year ago, I knew it had been 6 months since the acquisition. I said, well, how's it going? What's this company like? And she said it has a very strong culture. And she'd been to visit it once, but she already had an incredibly strong understanding of the culture of that organization. And so I sat down with her and I was like, how are you experiencing that? And it was the words, it was the messages, and all the people of that organization sort of, not that they all spoke the same, but they all had that same core belief that became very clear to her and was very compelling. And that was one of the reasons that she had felt comfortable to be, she was now working within that organization, as they're sort of transitioning. And so I think you don't have to be in the same place at all to get a strong sense of of your company's culture. But those, the values need to be clear, they need to be articulated, and they need to be, sort of lived and breathed and by everybody.
Interesting. And so how does so give us sort of some foundation of what are some of the successful companies do? Like, how do they embrace change? If suppose how like if I'm a corporation or if I'm an organization trying to ensure that I exist tomorrow, what are some of the benchmarks that I have to sort of compare myself against to define a well versed embracing progress organization? We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
Excellent question. One of the many challenges of the future of work is that it's not about best practices. It's really about principles, and the principles of sort of what is going to make your company be successful, because your company has very different talents to anybody else's company. So those principles can be applied to everybody, but the way they're going to be expressed and implemented in your organization are going to be very different. So that really, it means it's a question of like, how are we going to make this work at this organization? And so, really having an understanding of what are all the different pieces, how can we, aside from culture, what are the other elements that we need to prioritize? What are the priorities for our particular organization? How can we focus on those? And we can sort of have benchmarks in terms of progress against those. So, and this actually I do sort of share in my book in terms of what are the different ways that you can look at creating benchmarks for yourself. If you think of that workplace flexibility, for example, that's a policy, it's sort of a mindset first, but how effectively is it really being implemented at your company? So how many people are actually using it, and how much are they using it, and how effective is that being? And so you can benchmark those things in terms of progress with each piece of the puzzle to see how it's going and see how it's evolving. And then you can sort of do course corrections and surveys. Understanding how it's going with your particular organization is critical. And you'll find that as you try and make these changes and try and adapt and embrace progress and move forward onwards and upwards, that you'll get huge amounts of positive feedback from people in the organization, because it means that you're trying to think about them as individuals. You're trying to give them more flexibility. You're helping make their life and work activities all fit better. So if you're sort of showing the willingness to make these changes to help them work better, to make it all fit better in their lives, they'll give you lots of good suggestions and sort of contribute ideas. So it becomes a very compelling sort of company-wide movement that can really help it all happen, because there are a lot of different moving parts. But I see that different companies have particular areas where they find that they need to focus first, because of what their business is, or because of the particular individuals who either might need to change or might need to work differently. That it really depends on the company.
Interesting. And what's your take on, so each company is an aggregated sum of the talent that it contains, right? So in this future of work construct, like, how would a hyper distributed company attract great talent? Like, what are some of your insights on how would a company attract a younger prospering talent? Like, how can I keep myself inviting interesting talent to keep myself interesting?
I think a core thing is that a company wants to attract people that are aligned with their mission, their purpose, their culture. That helps connect that individual on something which isn't about money. It is about more than that. They're connected to their work. They're connected to the vision, to where the company's going, the objective. So that makes that connection much more profound. So if the company has a good sense of what they're about, what they're trying to achieve, and has articulated and sort of lives those cultural values and has those mindsets, they're going to attract the kind of person who also has that. If not, you might attract somebody who's not going to be cultural fit. And we've known for decades that cultural fit really matters. So that would be the starter. You're also, particularly with the younger workers, you're going to find people are finding that the new ways of working, which make logical sense for that company and for that position, they're going to want them. And just sort of saying, well, we've done it like this for years, that doesn't really hack it. Because if we can work in more productive, more logical ways, then it kind of makes sense to be doing that. So I would say that if you're looking to hire really good talent, then you need to think about how to help them be successful. And they're going to understand if you're really trying to help them be successful. And I think another thing is to do with careers and how career trajectories are changing. They used to be what I call linear, continuous, and compounding. And now it's much more fragmented. It's much more, it can be lateral and diagonal as well as vertical or not. And a lot of companies aren't articulating what the future might look like for say a young worker who's coming in. And the number one reason that millennials, it was a millennial report, I don't like using that word, but in this report, it said that the number one reason they leave is that they don't have a visible understanding of the path for them at the organization. And so I think if companies want to attract and keep good talent, it's a question of bringing them in and helping them understand what their future could look like, and making sure that as they go along, that they continue to help them understand and sort of say, well, these skills, now it's sort of changing, we're doing, this, and maybe, where do you want to go? And how does that fit with the team and the other needs of the organization? I mean, obviously the needs of the business and the needs and skills of each person need to have some alignment and be going on the same direction. But so those would be some of the critical things. And I think having an open and flexible mindset and being inclusive are going to be some of the most attractive elements that certainly the younger employees I come across and talk to, they are really attracted by them, because it gives them an understanding that company is most likely to be able to be successful as they go forward.
Interesting. And I think when you were talking about that, I think one incident that I recall. So I was talking to bunch of graduating one of the community college local in Boston, and I was addressing during the convocation, and I was talking to a bunch of graduating class, and I was talking to them, hey, what's your number one concern? What you're concerned about? And
right.
It's interesting that few of them says technology, right? Few of them automation, right? So they got that through hardship. We did something, and then I told them, hey, since you guys are younger, so you have used calculator in your doing your calculus and all that, right? So technology has always been your friend so far, and now going forward, you're looking at it as a competitor. Why? Why cannot you embrace it as part of you, saying, okay, whatever I'll see it with technology, instead of saying, no, I'll be competing with it, right? What's your take on the role of technology in this future of work? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so it's interesting that they see it as being competitive. I think that's understandable right now, because there's so much discussion, there's so much in the media about AI and machines replacing jobs. There's an interesting report by McKinsey that said that they evaluated and said that 60% of jobs, of 60% of jobs, 30% was replaceable by technology now. So it wasn't so much, it was very, very few jobs actually would be replaced completely. It was much more that parts of jobs. So jobs are going to change and skills are going to change. And one of the things I think that is extremely interesting and indeed very compelling about that is that a lot of the really boring, repetitive work is the easiest for machines to take over, which means it leaves us with less boring, repetitive work. So in fact, Workfront is a company that they have project management, really cool project management software. They did some research which showed that I think 80% around 80% of employees were actually excited about the idea of technology coming in and taking over some of those boring things, so they could actually, one, have more time to get their work done, and two, do more interesting things. So I think at the moment, like I said, talked about accounting firms, if you have, there are a whole bunch of jobs that are getting replaced for sure. And those often are at those bottom, like, accounting input jobs. And some of those, many of those may be going away because we haven't yet worked out what accounting firms are going to look like now. And they may not be sort of shaped like this. They may be much more, less triangular. And so they can go into potentially much more interesting jobs because the technology will allow them to not have to just do data input, but actually be doing more data analysis or data synthesis. And so I think jobs are definitely changing a lot, and we're not yet, so many companies, most people are not yet on top of what that's going to look like and where that's going to be. So that's where digital transformation in any company becomes extremely important, because when they've done that, then they have a better sense of what the jobs are going to be, which jobs are going to change, how much they're going to change. So I think that's where it is. And AT&T has a very interesting way that they've been doing it. They apparently have a sort of board where they show which jobs they see being replaced over the next 5 years, or that are going away over the next 5 years. And then they also post the skills and the jobs that they see coming up. And if you don't have that skill, they will help you. I don't remember whether they support you on that, or they partly fund it or whatever, but they show you where the jobs are going to be, and then you can help you transition. So that's when we get more understanding of how these jobs are going to evolve, how they're going to change, which pieces are going to go away. Then I think they won't feel as competitive about it. They may feel much more excited about it, because there is data to show that many people are.
Interesting. And I think one more sort of conversation that I recall, and this is something I don't want to be in this conversation, but I more often than I find myself in it. So I was talking to one of the CFOs, right, and from one of the public trade company, and he was telling me it's all numbers, Vishal. There's no emotions, right? So if my performance is measured by my book, right, and if an automation could replace a manual worker, at least the financial model, the current sort of way to evaluate companies' performance appreciates that, right, and that induce this urge to use financial instruments to grow, at least to see the company growth, and that has been resulting in a lot of people losing their job unnecessarily, because again, and I was pitching him this, and I talked to a lot of companies about this, is that you hire people for their creativity, for their diversity, for their difference of opinions, right? Machine has no creativity so far, right? So machine, you tell the machine what to do, and it does that. So ensure before you lose those talent pool that you leverage the creativity and the diversity and all that in some direction. But the current way, or at least the present work environment appreciates books more than the creative or the competitive edge of businesses. What is your take from your vantage point when we talk about the future of work? Would we see businesses increasingly relying less on their book perceptive value to measure progress and actually see a footprint of what all, like, change their KPIs, so as to speak, to say, okay, let me utilize every creative bit that I have towards my existence? Like, what's your take on that thought?
So interesting. If you think about the fact that globally, the percentage of engaged workers globally is 13%, 13. So if you imagine, and in the US, the non-engaged employees is 51%, something like that. So if you think about the fact that if you actually manage to engage the 51% of employees at your company that were not putting their efforts in, not really caring about whether they came up with the best idea, they're kind of like, yeah, that's fine. If you actually turned any of those people around and made them more productive without having to let anybody go, you could make that company that much more successful. So, you know, if you have those assets, they're just not being utilized. So, and put that on one side. And then the other side is that the World Economic Forum, I think it was a couple of years ago now. About 9 months ago, came out with an article which basically said that they had evaluated, and the two most important skills that they see going forward, you know, in this the fourth industrial revolution, is the one is basic technical skills, and second is soft skills, interpersonal skills. So it's really, if you sort of put those two together and sort of say, you know, so it means you're able to use tools and be able to use and leverage and enhance what you can do, but also the soft skills that we haven't been celebrating, we haven't been utilizing the soft skills to understand how workers work best, how to encourage and motivate people, and what's good. We have believed for the last 100 years, you know, all those management theories from the early 1900s were focused on the fact that money was the only motivator, only motivator. So we now know there's, you know, so much research to show that that isn't true. That it's a huge factor, but there are so many other things that are going to actually enable people to be more engaged in their work, to put more into it. Purpose. This is some really interesting data about how much harder people work, how much more, if they are connected with the purpose of their organization, they're more likely to be the leaders, they're more likely to be promoted, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So really helping with those soft skills, helping engage people and understand people to be more productive, that is going to. And then using that data, use the data that we can now get in organizations is empowering CFOs to understand their organizations better, including their people. And also what I'm very encouraged about is it's not just about quantitative data, it's also about qualitative data. Because there are so many things like employee engagement, like employee happiness. So there's an interesting, which is the Global Corporate Happiness Index, I think it's called. Which is from Universum. Now, the three components to that are interesting. One is the likelihood that somebody will recommend their employer to somebody else. The second is how likely are they to stay at their organization for more than 12 months? And the third is how satisfied, how fulfilled do they feel by their job? So this actually, it's not about happiness. It's about, you know, is that person really going to be an ambassador for your organization? Are they going to be working hard, and are they going to leave? So whilst they're qualitative, they have some very serious quantitative, you know, impact. So I think the ability to gather data, to actually synthesize it and use it to understand the people in the organization as well as how the business operations are working is very powerful. And I see CFOs being empowered, but hopefully not focused on, you know, just the nuts and bolts.
No, I think that's well said. And one more perspective of yours. So, gig economy, right? So now we are. I think I was talking to one of the high tech companies' chief of staff, and he said, Vishal, the future is in the hand of. Future would be in the hands of souppreneurs and sandwichpreneurs and not really chefs, right? So his perspective was that, hey, gig is a real thing. In your sort of from your vantage point, what is the role of gig economy or at least the gig workforce in seriously creating a company, or at least seriously contributing, or would this be kind of a side dish for some time? Like, what would be your 2 cents on the role of gig economy or gig workers in creating an enterprise?
Sure. I think the gig economy gets a bad rap, and I can understand why. And the key for me is about the definition. So for many people, the gig economy is a side hustle. It's gigs. It's short term, lots and lots of repetitious short term gigs. There's also what you the freelancer or the independent contractor, or what you might call a 1099. That's in the US, the 1099 is the form for people who are not employees. So if you say the 1099 economy, that could be someone who does long-term projects. And that is not typically a side hustle. That can be absolutely their main income, and they can have multiple revenue streams. So the gig economy is often, handy.com, I think, did some interesting research which showed that for most people, those kind of gigs were extra work, it was extra money. It wasn't their main source of income, and it wasn't very much per month. Those gigs I see as being helpful, and they can increase if you want to go on a great vacation, you can, or pay off a student loan. I talk to a lot of car service drivers, and they're often paying off student loans or helping out when whether there's a kid, they have extra expenses, stuff like that. That's different from this much bigger independent contractor freelancer economy. That is very much the part of the future. And certainly in the US, right now it's close to 40% and could go as high as 50%. A lot of people want to have flexibility, and they don't want to be beholden to one company, because who knows what's going to happen with that company. So whilst now it seems very fragmented, and you certainly don't have, certainly in the US, the kind of support that independent workers would best have in all kinds of ways, like saving for retirement and other things like that, having multiple revenue sources and having multiple clients, because a lot of companies now have sort of pools of familiar freelancers, so that they work, multiple times, maybe a year. So they have a sort of stable of people that they know. They might be former employees. They might be people who they didn't quite hire. And some companies are really focused on having a sort of core that's very, very stable. And then as they need to grow, because the companies need to be that much more flexible, and it's not predictable which way they're necessarily going to sort of move as things change in the future. So I see that blended workforce being positive both for the contractors and the companies, because there is a way to get to a place where everybody is supported. They're definitely not there yet. But a lot of people do sort of, use gig economy to talk about all of those people, and it's hard because the type of revenue that they have and the role that those gigs play in their life and their sort of the income that they can earn is very different. But there are a lot of challenges with where we are right now. For example, if banks in this country, if banks don't see that you have a full-time job and you have a good history of full-time jobs that last a long time, they don't really want to give you a bank loan. And so that changed. So a lot of things are changing, and there are companies that are being funded to help understand people's credit in much more detail, to show, if they don't necessarily have to have a full-time job maybe, but if they have a serious history of, revenues that that are stable, even if they're coming from multiple sources, then that might be able to give them a loan instead. So a lot of things need to change. So I do see the gig economy as being something that is very real and growing. But it's, again, that too is in its nascent stages. I mean, it's getting more mature, but there are a lot of things that need to come in to support those workers.
Interesting. And I think one thing that I was thinking about, I think you recently pointed about AT&T example, where AT&T tells people, hey, these sort of jobs are going obsolete and you should do something about it, and these are the skills.
Right.
When you talk to a typical organization, they have no clue. And I think most of them just play by the ear, right? Whatever is hitting them today, that's how I'll react maybe tomorrow. And with that mindset, you would, and I think now is particularly interesting time, like almost like I'm coming from the data science end, and when I talk to any business, all I see is businesses using technologies that are getting transformed, using methodologies that are getting transformed, nothing is stable today. Like everything is rapidly evolving.
Yeah.
And when you're running your organization in an environment where everything you rely on heavily is shaky and growing, you don't know where you'll end up maybe tomorrow, right? So it's a particularly interesting time for retooling. I know that previous U.S. government put, I think I remember Obama's address. One of his address was, "Hey, prepare the people for jobs of tomorrow, not yesterday." And many businesses we talk to, they have amazing numbers of workforce that are getting obsolete. Amazing brains, but not tuned in towards the future.
Yeah.
What is the resolve, like in your sort of embracing progress and next step to future of work mindset? What is the resolve for existing businesses? And I think one story, I almost pitch it in every of my previous podcasts. I think this company, top retailer, he said, I have 15,000 IT people and I just need 2 machine learning guys. I cannot find it. It's hard. It's hard, right? So
Right.
he said, I wish we could retrain this. Like, I know we have a lot of experts in these guys even today, but there's no way for me to figure that out. And I end up over hiring from outside. And it's,
Right. Yeah.
so what's the resolve? Like, what is your 2 cents on that?
So very interesting. Very interesting aspect because there's a really interesting company called Catalant, and they identify skills within within your organization, so you know what you have if you're trying to staff a project, where are the skills, how can you find those individuals, and if you don't have some of those skills that you need from within your company, they also have a pool of people outside who are qualified, vetted, who have those skills. So then you can staff the project properly. One of the challenges this is a very powerful way that we're moving towards that. But a lot of companies, a lot of people don't know their own skills. So if I don't know my own skills and I haven't really identified them because I was kind of defined by my job. And we are moving towards focusing more on what my skills are and what my other team member skills are, and then we can fill in the gaps like Catalant's doing. But if I've been defined by my job, but things have changed, what the business is doing has changed, then there's a mismatch. And so there's a lack of understanding, or we haven't been focused on trying to identify what I, Sophie, am good at, what you are good at, and therefore, who else do we need in that team, wherever we're going to get them from. So I think one of the challenges is understanding what our skills are, also how we're going to develop them, what skills we need in the future, where we are right now, and where, what are those different things that how long might the skills that I have right now be relevant? Because there's a lot to do with training and coaching and sort of upskilling as well. We're talking, in terms of AT&T. So that just the basic understanding about what I have and what you have within your organization. So companies who can really start to understand the skills that they have, like you're saying, that particular company, if he can identify the skills or have identified the skills that are within the organization and have a way to be able to search for them, then he can actually work out if he actually does need to bring somebody from the outside and exactly what skills those would be. And I think we're going to be, as we move from a chronological format resume to a functional format resume, which is really focused with the top. At the top is my skills. Like, this is what I'm really good at. And these are the different places that I've actually been using these skills in these different ways and had these different results. So it's become much more results oriented and much more skills focused. I was just reading an article today about behavioral competencies, which are some of those soft skills, because it isn't just about the skill, it's also about how you're using it and how effective you are in being able to implement it. So I think that's going to help. It's not where we are right now, but I think that will help in those situations to be able to understand the power of the people that you have in the organization and how best to I don't want to say utilize, but how best to enable them to be productive and do what they enjoy doing as well.
Interesting. And from your vantage point, what are some of the big opportunities that exist today for someone to exploit when it comes to our current state and our future state? Like what are some of the things that you could suggest that we should invest in?
Well, there's again, it's a McKinsey article. The last one was actually an HBR one, but a McKinsey article which has looked at the digital transformation status in different industries, and it shows that it goes from probably 23% up to sort of 60 something percent. So we've still got a long way to go. It showed that they found that the top 25% in an industry who are the sort of furthest along in digital transformation are capturing a disproportionate amount of the profits and the value, and the people at the 25% at the bottom are seeing depressed profits and revenue. So, in all these industries, there are lots of companies who haven't got there yet, who haven't taken on board that this is where we're going, this is what we need to do. How can we really not just put on, use email, use, whatever surface technologies there are, but really embed it, change the operations. And I use in my book, I actually use the Taxi and Limousine Commission and Uber in terms of just examples of how disruptive the technology was. Uber looked at the customer proposition, which for me, as somebody who's got stuck in the rain and missed a flight going to the airport because there were no taxis, because you had to hail something in the street, rather than rethinking the customer proposition, saying, how do we actually service that customer and enabling her to reach out to all the available drivers in a reasonable radius so that she can get to the airport. And that was using new technology. And so that kind of disruption can happen, and it can change a company, dramatically. So incumbents, whilst they have more money and more resources to make those changes, they also have embedded habits and sort of routines and ways of practices. So they have, plus and a minus. Young companies can have much more open minds about, because they don't have entrenched ways of doing things, and they can come at it with the freshest technology without having to replace anything. So, but they also haven't tried and tested everything in the past before. So you have this interesting sort of conundrum, but there really are huge advantages to really looking at how can we, step back from how we're doing things, think about what the optimal way to service our customers is. Is it really with the same service or product that we're using now? And how can we best deliver it? And then see how we would do that. And if it's using some of the practices and processes that we're using now, great. And otherwise, for other ones, we'll need to change, and then we sort of see how we adapt and change over time. So those are the opportunities, because in every industry there are still huge opportunities because so much of this hasn't changed. And another thing is really engaging employees. If you want to attract employees and you can engage them and you can be focused on their well-being and think about the benefits that are going to, a really, really simple thing is, let's just say, to go about health benefits. Like, I might want a gym membership, or that might be the last thing that I want on the planet. I might want nutrition coaching, or, who knows what. But there's a company called PeerFit that really easily provides these. It's just customized so that each person gets the same value, but they have a whole array of things that can suit them better. That can be a very simple way to be providing new employees, or existing employees, but attract new employees, because it'll say, we recognize that you're different from other people you work with, and we'll give you benefits that are relevant to you. So there are all kinds of things that people can do to change your organization in small ways, but that can make a huge difference to the people that work there.
Interesting. So now we're at the tail end of the conversation, and I want to spend a few minutes on your journey, particularly. So in your journey through this, what are some of the qualities you attribute your success to? Like, what are some of the things that you would suggest that has helped you stay sane throughout this progression and achieve so much that you have achieved? So what would those be?
Well, I'm lucky in a sense that I really enjoy change. So I start off fundamentally not kind of going, oh my God, so much change. That's something I actually like. And I love learning. And this is very much an ongoing learning environment. And the more that people can be open to learning and realizing that we don't sort of learn and stop and that's it, which has been the case, it's a question of continually, absorbing. So that's been very helpful to me without having to try hard. I enjoy that aspect of it. And so when it comes to change, I sort of look at what's going on and kind of go, let me understand it first. We try not to judge it. Because judging really gets in the way of, and that's where open-mindedness comes in. It's like, let me not sort of block whatever is coming and just kind of try and understand it first. Is this something that I can resist or want to resist? Because resistance is natural. It really is natural. And it helps, check that we're doing the right thing. So really, looking at what's happening, trying to understand it first. And I've definitely become more open-minded and more open because of so much change. You're kind of going, okay, all right, so let's understand all this data and then try and synthesize what's going on and how to understand it. And so I spent a lot of time really trying to understand what we're going through so that I can feel that I can sort of share some of my thoughts about and interpretations to help people, go through this transition as successfully as possible.
Interesting. So you are almost a living embodiment of the book, Embracing Progress.
I'm trying. I do. From when I was a kid, my sort of one of my sort of tagline was onwards and upwards. And so it kind of made sense. It's like, well, I do believe that we're going in a very positive direction. I do believe that, when we haven't been treating people like human beings, to really thinking about the individual, this is great. This is really powerful. And if people are allowed or permitted to be successful in different ways and to enjoy their work, then that's huge. Absolutely huge. I mean, I remember when I was sort of going into the workforce, that I remember thinking that if somebody really enjoyed their work, they probably weren't being paid for it. And it's kind of sad. It's really sad. But so now if we have lots of young workers who are going, I want to feel purpose, I want to feel mission, I want to feel connected with the work and really believe that I'm doing something that matters. I think it's amazing.
Beautiful. And one thing we ask all of our guests to share is some of their favorite reads or some of the books that they have read. Do you have any books that you could share to our listeners or viewers?
Yeah, I have two, and I have to get the name right of one of them, because hang on a second. It is Yuval Harari, who is Homo sapiens. So I haven't finished that yet, but I'm loving it. I love the way it's written. It's so easy to read and sort of a comfortable read, and so much information. Can be overwhelming. But the other book that I'm sort of doing an audiobook and sort of writing notes in the book is Ray Dalio's book, Principles. In fact, I was, sort of chuffed to see that in my book, I talk about principles a lot and the fundamental truths of how your business works. And his book is called Principles. It is very powerful. It is very, very, very interesting and very thoughtful a way of sort of how to be incredibly open. He talks about radical openness and radical truth. And so I highly recommend that, because I haven't got to the work bit yet, and I'm in the middle of that as well. But I think for people who also, that is a very powerful book for trying to understand how to be successful in this world, because it's all incredibly applicable to where we are now and where we're going to be going forward. So yeah,
interesting. And which one of Yuval's books, Homo Sapiens or Homo Deus? Which one is?
Which one's what?
So which one is the Yuval Harari book? So it's Homo Deus or it's
Ray Dalio's book is Principles.
Okay, because have you read Yuval's Sapiens?
No, not yet.
I
yet.
Think I haven't. It's two big books, but it's beautiful.
I know. I bought it, but I haven't read that one yet. No, I'm trying to get through them.
Exceptional guy. I think it's he nailed it. It's a big fan, by the way. So that's why I just awesome. So last but not the least, if you want our listeners and viewers to take away something from this conversation, Like what would be that takeaway? What would be your closing remark for our listeners and viewers? Besides reading your book.
Well, I think reading my book will be helpful to sort of understand what's going on and have a sort of way of approaching it.
Yes.
I think change is hard, and human beings we're not comfortable with that. And the good news is that we're all in this boat together, and it's going to be messy for all of us, every single one of us. And I think just acknowledging that, and so that we don't freak ourselves out, and iterating, as we go forward, things are going to continue to evolve. And so, having a sort of thought that, like, this is where I want to go. This is how I want to work with my team. This is how I want to treat my team. This is how I want to run my company. All those are sort of goals, this progress that we can aim for, and just keep checking in on it, and keep checking and iterating, and sort of saying, does what I was thinking last week or last month make sense now? And sort of that helps you not only be on the right track and stay on the right track and adapt, but also get used to this change as a constant, and start being much more comfortable with this ongoing iterations, because that's sort of where we are. And we haven't, that's one of the sort of fundamental things that I think can make a lot of people very uncomfortable, is that there's so much change going on. So if we can get comfortable with sort of understanding that we just need to keep iterating and checking in and sort of looking ahead, I think it's very powerful. There are lots and lots of incredible opportunities, and embracing that positive vision is going to help too.
Beautiful. And with that, thank you so much, Sophie, for sitting with us on a gracious, good amount of an hour and few minutes, and helping us understand what's happening in the world of work, and where the world is heading to. I do appreciate you for this book. I think the more we read about perspectives on how the future is shaping for all of us, the more it will make us think that what we need to do to make that change. And I think I do appreciate you spending your time and energy in helping us see through what embracing progress is and what is happening. And thank you so much. You're always welcome back on the podcast, and good luck with the book success, and looking for a sequel. Do come back and share your journey. And whenever you're in Boston, let me know. We'll catch up over a coffee or beer, whichever. So thank you so much.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me, Vishal. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on a